Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video, and check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you would like to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. We are back with hot takes, and I just have one quick request at the top here. I would appreciate if you guys did not oversaturate the comment section with replies to the title take or too many replies to the other takes in general. If you want to participate in that discourse, do it in the pinned comment or in the comment section in reply to that take. It's really hard to filter out and get a bunch of good, unique takes throughout the video if we're just continuing the same conversations over and over and over again throughout the time. So I appreciate that you guys have things to say, but unless you really got some shit you got to get off your chest about the title take, let's leave that one alone. One last thing as well, if you would like to just have general discussion about the videos here or some of the title takes here, there is a Discord that you get access to for joining our Patreon, so that's another way to do it if you're really yearning to argue about whether or not Jokic and Shea should share the MVP award. But with that said, let's finally get into these takes. A random person 2540 saying SGA and Jokic should share the MVP. But what's actually going to happen is we're going to get a 2006 MVP situation. 2006 being an MVP that went to Steve Nash, with LeBron and Dirk both having a strong case, or I think Kobe also had a strong case. Hell of a year that MVP race was, but one that is remarkably controversial. Nash won that while his seeding was lower, but it was because Amari Stoudemire didn't play basically the entire year. I mean, there's never been a co-MVP in history. I know there's been co-rookie of the year. I think there might be another co-award in there somewhere, but that's not something that has ever traditionally happened. And I do think there is a decent case to be made that this is one of those instances where the MVP cases are so close that it would be within reason. At the same time, at least for me, and I'm sure Jokic fans who are on Jokic's end of this feel the same way, I still feel like it should go to Shea more than it should go to Jokic, so you gotta pick one, and I would really only do co-MVPs if we were like really undecided, but seems like the decision is going Shea's way, and I'm happy to stick with it because that's just what I think that it should be. We got a comment here from Jarvis Johnson, not a hot take, but he says, Helio Ball, the forgotten Ball brother. Really cool seeing Jarvis on here. It makes me feel famous that a real YouTuber replied to me. What do I got to do to get on an episode of Sad Boys? I like that podcast. I would like to be there. I will go to Los Angeles just to be on your show. Shout out to Jarvis. From KJJR, sports writers regret not giving Jordan all of the MVPs and now punish everyone after with that precedent like it's a Supreme Court case and not something that could change at any time. Nowadays, there's no criteria for MVP voting, literally. Voters choose players at their discretion. Sometimes it's the best player on the best team, Dirk in 07, Curry in 15. Sometimes it's narrative over achievement or historical precedent, AI in 01, Derrick Rose in 11, Westbrook in 17. Sometimes it's the league's best player, Kareem, MJ, LeBron, Jokic. Sometimes it's voter fatigue, 97, Malone. Sometimes it's their turn, Kobe in 08, Harden in 18, and Embiid in 23, and often some combination of the above. The thing is that the award did not have a ton of precedent pre-90s just because I believe the voting was heavily determined by the players at the time, and since then that has not been the case, and since the media has taken over, I don't know. I think voter fatigue is a natural human thing. People talk about voter fatigue like it's something that, oh, the fucking media and their voter fatigue. It's like, dude, people just pick and choose and go through time periods and lulls where they care about certain things and don't care about others, become blind to greatness. It's just a very commonplace human behavior to get used to something and start to underappreciate it. The other thing is, like, I have felt like there are MVP awards that have gone to the wrong player throughout the last 20 years, but there's only a couple instances of that. For the most part, you could say that the 2008 MVP or the Harden MVP was kind of just let them have it, let it be their turn. But like Kobe in 2008 led the Lakers to a top seed for literally the first time that he had done that since Shaq was gone. So that's not really just handing it to him. Harden in 2018, his team was, if it wasn't the best in the regular season, it was the second best, and his numbers were ridiculous. And obviously LeBron had a good case there, but still, Joel Embiid in 23 had one of the greatest individual offensive seasons that anyone has ever seen ever. Yes, it's the regular season. Yes, he doesn't hold up well in the postseason historically, but that's not what this award's about. Like, I wouldn't really say those awards should have gone to anybody besides for who they did. So I think it's a little bit of revision to be like, they fucked up this precedent in the 90s and now they haven't been able to fix it since. I think the way that it was in the 90s is the way that it has made sense to happen. Can it be confusing or upsetting that the MVP does not have a criteria directly? Sure. Has that been the understanding of the award pretty much historically and especially in the last 30 years? Yes, and I'm not upset about it. I'm sure if you have a personal feeling tied up in one player or another winning it, then that could be different. But I think people freak out and argue about the MVP and it being a robbery every single year. The MVP cannot be a robbery every single year. That's stupid. From Shepherdess or Shepherddice. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I hate the way people mythologize players, especially often with the intent to scrutinize usually LeBron. It makes me feel like I'm going crazy because everyone has amnesia. MJ/Kobe would never. They have. They literally have. If you don't remember, you can look it up, I promise. The other day I saw MJ has never missed a dunk that bad, but when you point out that he has, say, well, even his mistakes looked good. I have no idea what looks good about missing a wide open fast break dunk. You're going to have to argue with Rudy on that one. If you want to compare players, do it in actual good faith. That's impossible if you think one player was some infallible god, even when you've been shown evidence that they weren't. Yeah, the thing is, it's more about time. You know, mythology, like looking at things through rose-tinted glasses, only really looking at the positive in hindsight, filtering out all the bad things. That is human nature, and people kind of get mythologized in general, especially after they have a period of fame and success that's so undeniable, and then a bunch of time passes after that, because that allows the success to be the only thing that is a part of the conversation. Like, you have to talk to like LeBron fans who are trying to do propaganda against Michael Jordan in order to hear about any of his blunders. Now, I will give MJ this. His blunder to success ratio is one of the best ever, you know, using it relative to the amount of help that he had. But they exist, and he's not a perfect player. No player ever has been. But he gets talked about like he's a perfect player, and then they want to talk about LeBron's fucking free throw percentage on ESPN. Like, stuff like that, it definitely comes from a place of this guy was then, and you're now, and now sucks, and then was good. And that bleeds into the conversation so much, and I think a lot of people do not realize that they are doing it. Some do, but for the most part, it's just, again, kind of just a natural human way to look at this thing. The problem is just that the fallibility of humans leads to a bunch of unideal results, I guess. But I agree. And my big thing that I would also say is like, wait 20 years. I think the GOAT debate will be so much more interesting 20 years from now when LeBron has been mythologized and we're far enough away from his career where we'll filter out a lot of the bad things, look at mostly the good things. And at that point, that's when things will get interesting. Right now, Michael Jordan has had home court advantage on the GOAT debate for LeBron's entire career. Once the game is no longer purely he's been there and LeBron's not done, the conversation's more interesting and more final. There's no more speculation at the end of it. From Tween Cross, Willis Reed is the most underrated player of all time. When people mention the greatest Knick ever, they often say Patrick Ewing, but Willis Reed delivered both of the Knicks championships. He won Finals MVP twice and achieved the rare feat of winning regular season MVP, Finals MVP, and All-Star MVP in the same season. Yet he is rarely mentioned when discussing the best power forwards or the greatest Knicks of all time. Well, that's because he did this in the 1970s, and I believe the Knicks won the championship in 1970 and 1973. And it was Willis Reed, and then it was also Clyde Frazier, if I believe. I always mix up Fraziers and shit. I hope I'm not fucking that up, but I'm like so sure that that's correct. But Willis Reed, he was a power forward who was kind of ahead of his time. He had a real mid-range game. He had the ability to attack off of the face-up, put the ball on the floor. Just like if you go and watch his highlights, he looks and moves a lot different than a power forward at that time typically did. He was a genuine bucket from mid-range, really good in the post, and often just considerably faster than whoever he was matched up against in a way that they really were not prepared for at his time, and that is why he had been so dominant at points. He also has the iconic game where, is it that he gets hurt and comes back same game and plays, or is that he plays the start of the next game as a way to motivate the players and he scored like 4 points? I don't know. He played injured though, and it was something that really motivated his teammates and got them the win in the series overall. Yeah, Willis Reed, in terms of best player in Knicks franchise history, the guy who has 2 titles with them, I don't understand why, you go Patrick Ewing, or especially when people say Carmelo Anthony, that's like, okay, so you just don't know the history of the Knicks then. If you think Carmelo Anthony is the best player and most important franchise player in Knicks history, you're like a child, or you're my age at the very least. You're not going to be someone who actually is knowledgeable of the 70s or the 90s, because Patrick Ewing played championship contender conversation basketball for damn near a decade, and maybe even a decade, and Willis Reed won 2 titles. Like, the championship success is there. Meanwhile, Carmelo Anthony brought the Knicks to 2 playoff series. Not using this as a jumping off point to hate Carmelo Anthony, just that it's between Willis Reed and Patrick Ewing. If you want to make the argument the 90s were a better era, Patrick Ewing was a better player, even if he doesn't have the accolades of the titles or MVP, I can understand that perspective. But it's those 2. If it's not one of those 2, I think that's kind of insane to say. I think Frazier also has a shot because he was underrated as hell. Very good defender, like very, very good defender. From McBreeden, guys like Westbrook will be remembered fondly for his legacy. I know it's hard to imagine such a case with dudes like him because they are so disrespected while they play, but that's what we do to all the players. The fans so badly want every player's legacy to be that of winning. Once the dust settles and you realize only like 20 dudes in history of the sport are associated heavily with winning, the reality sets in and you can appreciate different players for their effort. Guys like Melo and Vinsanity were heavily criticized their entire career. Now they're basically universally loved. Westbrook and his ilk will get their flowers eventually. Just takes time. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. The only time you're really going to hear a lot of the criticisms of Russell Westbrook is going to just be when all-time rankings are happening and X player gets put under him, and some people find that egregious, and then they're going to be like, okay, he was never a championship caliber player for real. Obviously never actually crossed that finish line. So I agree with you. I think a lot of the focus in the time is what you can't be. And then after time passes, we just focus on what you were. Like the fact that Russell Westbrook is one of the worst high volume 3-point shooters in NBA history is something that I repeat constantly now, because whenever there's a conversation about how he fits into a team, it's like, look, he's one of the worst 3-point shooters in history. So that's going to affect the result. And I have to talk about that. I have to talk about the turnover problems. I have to talk about his jump shooting in the mid range. I have to talk about just his propensity to do a bunch of stupid things randomly. But when the time has passed and I'm just reflecting upon Russell Westbrook, I'm going to remember the 2017 season. I'm going to remember him being a part of that young Thunder team that went to the finals. And that's pretty much all it's going to be. And the exact point about Michael Jordan being mythologized with time, it won't happen to that extent with Russell Westbrook, but it happens to some level of extent across the board every single time with every really truly all-time great player. And Russell Westbrook is an all-time great player, so he is going to be remembered fondly. You are right. I also think he didn't piss off too many people along the way. Like, if anything, there is more association and upsettedness with his flaws holding him back from being who we thought he could be or who we wanted him to be. And again, People just take you for what you are when it's over. From Patrick05 Morgan, speaking of the mythologizing of the game, my biggest pet peeve is when someone tells you trash talk or the perceived tough guy macho attitudes of past eras would completely override a modern player who may be more talented, more skilled, more athletic, and have more knowledge of offensive/defensive schemes. Like the Larry Bird would trash talk Kevin Durant and send him home crying to his mama, or when Dennis Rodman said he'd have Draymond eating out of the palm of his hand. None of that stuff actually makes a modern athlete play worse. In fact, in most cases, superstars play better once antagonized. Look at Patrick Beverley. He's had the reputation for being a lockdown and tough defender, much like his previous era players, and yet anytime he tries it against Steph or Dame, they go off for 35-plus points. Trash talk won't save you from the Durant hezzy pulling you to death or LeBron coming down the lane like a freight train. Yeah, this was recently said by Stephen A. Smith that some former NBA player came up to him and was like, Steph wouldn't have averaged even 17 points per game in our era because we would have just hit him. Like, we would have just been physical and in his face and trash talking all the time. And it's like, at best, that take is stating that if you are too good, we'll just punch you, which to me, that's not a basketball take. It's not a basketball position to hold. Physicality and being really aggressive and trying to be intimidating, being bad boys and all of that is stuff that can help you win. But I think we have mythologized that aspect of the game as though it is the most overwhelmingly important and pervasive aspect of the game at that time. And it's just not true. That was not the case. Sorry to burst that bubble, but it's not. So with that in mind, the fact that people think that will override being the greatest shooter of all time in an era where big men are slow as fuck, where they drop on the screen constantly across positions. Like, it's not even just the big drops on the screen, the guard drops on the screen. And guess what? Because NBA players are great athletes for their time, no matter what, the players of his era would react to his play style and adjust their defensive scheme. They wouldn't be dropping like that over time. However, it would take a very long time for the league to catch up to what Stephen Curry would be bringing to the table if you just teleported him to 1980. All that stuff is ridiculous, and physicality, getting hit on drives, getting thrown to the floor, stuff that now is a flagrant one, not being a flagrant one back then, that stuff is on the margins of the game. A overwhelming percentage of the actual experience of the game, the overwhelming percentage of what actually matters and tangibly affects the results of basketball. It's not physicality and trash talk. I'm sorry to tell you, you have way oversimplified that shit in your head if that's how you look at it. Sorry to say. Physicality matters, especially for a smaller guy named like Steph. Here's a good point. Michael Jordan, he infamously put on that weight because he was getting, thrown around a lot against the Detroit Pistons while still averaging 30, just for the record. Steph Curry weighs as much as young Michael Jordan did and has for most of his career, like since 2015. In fact, let me just, fact check on that. Yeah, he's listed at 205 pounds then. I believe he got to 220 to 225 at that later stage of his career. Stephen Curry is listed at 185 pounds. Apparently, he himself claims that he's 195. I'm getting 195 to 200 pounds. According to StatMuse, he's 200 pounds. Either way, you can survive as a guard who's not all that big in the NBA because you have the ability, you have the talent. You don't beat being the greatest shooter of all time out of somebody. You just don't. I will entertain this one reply to the title take because it's said very succinctly. That's another thing. If you really want your hot take in this video, in these videos, the more succinctly you say it, the more likely. But from Soraido, I hope I did that right. Genuinely think that MJ would have become the most unliked athlete of all time in our era. Well, I don't know. It does seem like the stuff that he does, how permissible it is dependent a lot on how the media spins it. if Mike is so undeniably great, such an undeniably best player in the NBA type situation when he drops into this modern NBA, which I do think he would still be the best player in the NBA, just because I don't think Jokic's peak is quite as good as Michael Jordan's peak, but we're not getting into that right now. Feel free to do it in the comments if you want, but I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Even if he's the best player in the NBA, if he's the best player in the NBA rather, I do think the NBA takes shit, or I do think media takes shit like punching Steve Kerr in the face, and they spin that in a lot more positive a way than they would for like the Draymond Greens of the world. But at the very least, I think he would have far more haters than he did, because unless you were just a fan of a team that he was beating, there really weren't a lot of reasons to be a Michael Jordan hater back then. And I also just think it's more commonplace now to just have a higher percentage of haters. Like, people were highlighting, like, back when Michael was in his era, like, there were more people watching games than ever before. So, yes, the social media shit would be different, but the focus on him was actually larger scale. The difference between that is, like, being able to turn it off, being able to close a door, and then that's not your life. Where social media, not other people are responsible about it and can, draw that line in the sand. Plenty of people are, but it's more common than it isn't to just not be able to deal with the fact that you have that criticism screen in your phone. That's a hard thing to ignore. And just the constant scrutiny with Michael Jordan's attitude, with the way that he bumps head, and with the way that modern NBA players are happy to go comment to the media about that shit. Yeah, I don't know if he would be the most unliked ever, because he's so good and so cool and doesn't have any like overwhelmingly bad moral slippage. I think he'd be fine. Way more disliked, way more criticized than he was in his era. Absolutely. From 40 Nights, I just caught the tail end of this take, saying that Shawn Kemp's was still pretty good through his second Cavs season, arguably, so that would have been interesting, me talking about Shawn Kemp on the Bulls. He says that Shawn Kemp is arguably one of the best non-Hall of Fame NBA players. Shawn Kemp is not a Hall of Fame player? Okay, am I just remembering his prime as considerably shorter than it actually was? Yeah, I don't think I am. This is a 6-season long all-star stretch where he is averaging 18 and 10, 1.4 steals, 1.5 blocks, 51% on 2-pointers, which is all of his shots. He takes 0.1 threes, but still, gets to the free throw line a decent bit. I don't really understand. I also believe he was a pretty good defensive player, good scorer, all NBA level, all NBA second team level 3 times. I don't know, dude. I feel like if you surveyed most players who have made 3 all NBA teams in their career, most of them would be all-stars. Not to mention, it's not even just that he's a part of these teams. These Seattle Supersonic teams are good as fuck. 57 wins, 64 wins, 57 wins, 63 wins, 55 wins. 47 is not as good. So yeah, we're getting out of that frame. But 50-plus win seasons, year after year after year, 3 All-NBA second team selections, 19-10 3 stocks on good efficiency averages. I don't know. I feel like there are dudes in the Hall of Fame with less. Not to mention, just from a flash perspective, he has some of the best dunks of all time, and he probably has my personal favorite dunk of all time, which is where he dunks on the guy and then does the pointing at him on the floor. That shit's fire. That's amazing. Man, I didn't know Shawn Kemp wasn't in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is so stupid and inconsistent. All right, this is going to be the last take of the video from Cheese It Master. The reason why big threes don't work anymore is because the average talent a role player has in the modern NBA is much higher than it was a decade ago. So 3 good role players is the equivalent to an all-star or to a third star. Little bit of backwards writing here, but I think I get your point. 3 good role players is as good as a third star. I would make the argument that 3 good role players is substantially better than a third star. And for the most part, throughout history, I have felt that way. The only difference is if your third star is a defensive specialist type, like Draymond Green, or your third star being Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh is a 16, 17 point per game scorer and then one of the best defenders in the world. Something like a Kevin Love third option, though, I think you can do a lot better spreading $35 million a year across 3 players than you can with just one. But it's not just that it's 3 players instead of 1. It's the fact that you literally have the bodies in terms of health. Like, if you invest a shitload in a star player and then that star player is like injury prone, that star player misses a playoff series where you could have had 3 role players instead, even if 2 of those guys get hurt, 1 role player is still better than no star. That's what I remembered feeling about the Nets when they were in the playoffs in 2022. James Harden gets hurt, and the guys that they traded for him was like Jared Allen, Karis LeVert. I don't remember who the other guy is, but I remember there being another genuinely good playoff rotation caliber guy who was left in the fold there. And it was like, if you didn't make that James Harden trade, if you had Jared Allen and Karis LeVert in this series against the Milwaukee Bucks to help Kevin Durant instead of like starting Blake Griffin at the center position, if you didn't do the 3rd star approach, you would have won that series and maybe gone all the way to the finals. There are plenty of instances you can pull from throughout history that are like that. And it's another reason why I do not over criticize the Thunder for trading James Harden, because they had 2 excellent offensive options. And then when they had to choose who the 3rd guy was going to be, they had another guy who could score a shitload of points, or they had another guy who plays defense and is a role player within the offense, and Serge Ibaka. I think they were right to make that choice. It's just all the other decisions related to personnel were fucking terrible. 3 guys who are role players, like good role players, will well exceed Bradley Beal. Let's just say it. Let's just put it like this. And we're not even going to say Bradley Beal for Bradley Beal from this year, because for what it's worth, Bradley Beal was pretty good in his role as a 3rd option last year. To be fair, the numbers are actually not as different. You know, his assists are down, his rebounds are down, his efficiency from 3 is down 4%. With 18 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 43% from 3 on 4.4 attempts per game. That's, I believe, the highest 3-point percentage of his entire career. So do you want something like that, or would you prefer, let's just say for the sake of just picking from a random team, would you rather have that or Aaron Wiggins, Nikola Jovic, and Duncan Robinson? I feel like I'd rather have the latter. Or the other thing, like Russell Westbrook, when he got traded to the Lakers, you had to give up KCP, Kyle Kuzma. I don't remember who else exactly. I know there was someone else who came in that deal. But like, would you have rather had Kuzma and KCP throughout those Russell Westbrook years? I think the answer is yes, even if Kuzma's Kuzma. He's still better than within the role that he would have been in than Russell Westbrook was, and KCP especially in terms of specializing in a role. 39% from 3 on 5 attempts, that would be great. So yes, give me 3 role players over a star any fucking day of the week. Very good take from Cheez It Master, but that is the end of this video. Shout out to Nick for editing, and goodbye.